You'll always have difficult people in your life, and some of them will be the people you work with, whether it's remote or in the office. There'll always be someone you find challenging. It may be a peer, your boss, maybe even someone who reports to you. So, how do you have a difficult conversation with a difficult person? Well, many of us sort of go into it as a battle of messages, where I'm suggesting you go into it as a learning conversation. So let's start with the battle of messages. Here's a starting assumption. You know everything you need to know to understand what happened, and therefore your goal is to convince them that you're right. So let's see where you start with a learning conversation. In the learning conversation, each of us has different information and different perception. So the goal is to exchange and explore each other's stories. Back to the battle of the messages. You have an assumption that you know exactly what they intended, and therefore you want to let them know that what they did was wrong. In a learning conversation, you know what you intended, but you probably don't know what's in their head. You only know the impact that it had on you. In that case, the goal is to share the impact on yourself, find out the impact on them. So instead of a power play about who's right and who's wrong, you're partners in this conversation. And finally, in the battle of messages, there's an assumption. Someone is to blame. There's always someone to blame. So it's either all their fault or all your fault. And your goal is probably for them to take responsibility and accountability and sort of say it was their fault. In a learning conversation, the assumption is that both of you have probably contributed to whatever's going on. So you're going to put your heads together and figure out how your actions produce this result and what you could do differently later. Now, I realize it's easy to say this, especially with nothing but a painting and a brass palm tree behind me. And I truly recommend that you practice this when the stakes aren't quite as high. Do that by letting them go first. Do that by trying to understand what they're saying versus convincing them that you're right. By the way, it doesn't mean you're not right. It means that you actually want to reduce the tension and some of the emotion that so often goes into these. So go out, practice. Do not practice, I would advise you, with a brother-in-law, sister-in-law, partner, or a parent. Do it with someone else. Even though my dog doesn't listen to me, she gladly lets me practice with her. So you might want to start there and just keep going at it. Thanks so much for your time.